Hey guys, this is Carrie, and in this video we're going to take a look at doing some of the other sections for the create task. So most importantly, as you jump into the create task, what you're going to do is you're going to be logging into this website, digitalportfolio.collegeboard.org, and you're going to have this link provided to you in an email regarding, or in the assignment on Google Classroom. So the first things that are really important are there are two parts for your AP exam that you're going to be submitting, and actually now that we're out of school, the exam has been changed to just be these two parts, so there is not a written component, no multiple choice test. There's only the create task and the explore task. So what we've been working on is the create task, so make sure that you're in that part of your AP digital portfolio. Yours will look a little different than mine, but if you click individual written responses, it will give you a couple of important links on how you can submit your assignment. So the first thing that you notice is that there is a template for us to provide these answers. And if you download this template, it is in Microsoft Word. And a lot of us might not have access to Microsoft Word right now because we're working on Chromebooks or we're working on our computers from home. So this isn't required to use this template. So instead, I created a new template on Google Docs, and you can use that template to answer these questions. Now, before you go to the template, actually, it's really important that you take a look at your game code. And you're going to start to add some comments about what we developed as a class and what you developed. So in my game code, maybe the best thing I can do is I can show you just a preview of kind of my version of the create task. So in this example version, if we drag this game over here and we start to play it, most of these features were developed as a class. So the player moving was something we developed as a class. The burgers we developed as a class. Getting eaten by the monster we developed as a class. However, the feature that I added that was new is actually this bomb feature. So if you press spacebar, you drop a bomb, and it kills the monsters. Okay, so keeping all of that in mind, let's go back to what we were doing before. So before you start to answer any of these questions, a really important step is to go over to your program code and start to add some comments about who created what parts of the code. So if you look at the code here, a lot of this is code that we wrote together as a class. So I want to make sure that it's evident to the person grading this that I'm not trying to take credit for that. So the following game was developed as a class. And this grayed out text is something called a comment that we've looked at before. And comments are lines of code that are not read by the computer, but can be read by people. The following game was developed as a class. I will mark in the code sections that I developed independently. I will also mark in the code sections that I found online or we developed as a class. And so going through this, we wrote this as a class. Just adding some comments. This function was written as a class. And I'm just going to copy and paste that for a couple of these. All of these functions are written as a class. This isn't really a function. These images were my choice of images, but the code was written as a class. So I want to make sure I'm not taking credit for that. These lists were created by the class. The player class was created by the class. Okay. The food class was created by the class. All right, so far this isn't too interesting. Same thing for the monster. And I'm just making an annotation before each big block of code. The monster class was created by the class. And then here I get to the part that wasn't created by the class, which is the bomb class. I created the bomb class independently. And then within the bomb class, I've got my constructor, my draw method, and then I marked here that this is my algorithm. I created the update algorithm independently. And it looks like I've actually already done some of this before. I'm going to redo this actually. So remembering kind of the instructions for the algorithm, I think it's nice to mark in our code where those sub-algorithms were. So the first sub-algorithm was to get the distance between the monster and the bomb for each monster. And this get distance algorithm was written as a class. And it's okay if part of my sub-algorithm was something that we wrote together. Now instead, down here, this section, the second sub-algorithm is to check to see if the monster and bomb collide, and then to run a number of steps if they do collide, including increasing the score, playing a sound, and removing the monster and bomb from the game. Okay, so continuing on, we can continue to mark this function was written as a class. And we want to be doing this throughout the whole document. The game loop was written as a class. And if you found something that you copied and pasted from the internet, you could write, I copied and pasted this from the internet, and then put the site where you copied and pasted it from. But now we've actually finished commenting all of our code with some important steps that I think will really help us to answer these questions. So give your document a save and switch over to the written responses area. So I can't really provide a template for you to answer these, so you want to make sure that you're not just copying and pasting my answers and then changing it to fit yours. Otherwise, they're going to realize that it's a template, and that would be plagiarism. You want to be writing these answers from scratch, but you want to make sure that your answers do a couple of things. So for question 2a, provide a written response or audio narration in your video that identifies the programming language, identifies the purpose of your program, and explain what the video illustrates. So for me, I don't know if it, yeah, I guess I should probably just type this out as an example, and then you guys can be shared on it. So I used the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript programming languages to code a game with the rest of my class. In particular, or sorry, the goal of the game is to have the player, which is the shark, collect burgers and avoid getting eaten. I added a new feature to this game, which is the bomb feature, which was designed to make the game more fun because the player can now fight back against the monsters. All right, so let's make sure that I got full credit for this answer. So a couple things to check. I'm going to be including a rubric, and each row of the rubric is 1 point for your written responses. So for the first point here, let's see. The video demonstrates the running of at least one feature of the program submitted. So yep, my video definitely did do that. And we're going to talk more about the video part of this next time I shoot one of these instructional videos on how you can make the video. But I kind of showed the example already of that in the just demonstrating the game. And then the response, audio narration or written response, identifies the purpose of the program, what the program is attempting to do. So I'm going to get the full point if I've done those two things. So let's see. I use the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript programming languages to code a game with the rest of my class. The goal of the game is to have the player, shark, collect burgers, and avoid getting eaten by monsters. I don't know. I added a new feature to the game, which is the bomb feature, which is designed to make the game more fun because the player can now fight back against the monsters. I definitely think that we've identified the purpose of the program. And then for the decision rules here, you want to make sure that you're earning the point. So these are things that will, just like notes that might be helpful for you to read. But down here it says, do not award the points if any of the following are true. So if you don't submit a video, you automatically don't get the point for this row. The video does not illustrate the feature mentioned. Well, the video definitely illustrates the bomb feature, and it definitely illustrates the main gameplay. and the video does not illustrate the running of the feature. The video does illustrate the running of the feature. So there's a couple of scoring notes here as well that might pay to look at. All right, so now we're on to response 2B, and 2B gets 2 points total, so we want to make sure that we do both of these things. So it says here, describe the incremental and iterative development process of your program, focusing on 2 distinct points in that process. Describe the difficulties and/or opportunities you encountered and how they were resolved or incorporated. In your description, clearly indicate whether the development described was collaborative or independent. At least one word, or at least one of the points must refer to independent program development. All right, so looking at the rubric in advance is really helpful here. So describe or outline the steps used in the incremental and iterative development process to create the entire program. So here it's the entire program, and really important is if you only focus on the 2 points here, you don't earn the point for this row. So you're going to try to describe, and I'm just going to make a note for myself here in the answer thing, the whole process is the first point. And then the second point is the specifics, specific to examples. And that's here, specifically identifies to program development. So incremental, if you're not sure what that word means, you can Google it, incremental definition. Relating or denoting an increase or addition, especially one of a series on a fixed scale. All right, so this is totally a not helpful definition for incremental. Incremental basically means that it builds up over time, the same way that you might add a number, you add 1 to something, or you add 5 to something, and it slowly builds up over time. The program actually slowly builds up over time because you add lines of code to it over time. Let's see if iterative is a little bit more helpful in terms of how Google defines it. So iterative definition. And for iterative, relating to or involving iteration, especially, again, not helpful. An iterative development process. Let's see, what is an iterative process? No, it's not letting me look it up. Let's look up iterative process. An iterative process is a process for calculating the desired result by means of a repeated cycle of operations. So this is a little bit more helpful of a definition for iterative. So if I think about the repeated process for development here, it was like try to brainstorm some ideas, try to write some code, try to write the code, test the code, debug the code, come up with ideas, write the code, test the code, come up with ideas, write the code, test the code. So now let's start to try to answer our question. So iterative has this like cycle of feeding back on itself. All right. Okay, so thinking about my process. To design the whole game, we slowly built up the features in the game one step at a time. Beginning with the background, and you should really not have the exact same thing that I'm writing here. Even if you use the game, you should be saying this in your own words. Beginning with the background, adding the player, adding the food, adding the enemies, and then finally, on my own, I added the bomb feature. Each time we added a new feature, we went through a cycle of brainstorming, trying to code the feature, testing the feature, and finally debugging the feature until it worked. Okay, so I've got my iterative process because I'm going through the cycle repeatedly. It seems incremental as well because it's one step at a time, adding the player, adding the food, adding the enemies, and then adding the bomb feature on my own, which is great. Brainstorming is one word. Trying to code the feature. All right, let's see. So I think I've got row 2, which is the description of the entire process. Now I need to focus on 2 difficulties that I encountered in my my own personal process, or 2 opportunities. And so when I think about this, one difficulty was that I had to remove the bombs from, and I don't want to write this all out because this video is getting a little bit long already. One difficulty that I encountered was that I had to remove the bomb from the list, and I needed to search for the right bomb. So I ended up having to write a new function, remove by value, to do this. So that would be one difficulty that I got and I wrote about. So I'll just imagine that I wrote that sentence. And then the second thing is you can do a second difficulty, but for me, a second thing was the opportunity. I had a chance to use this getDistance function that we wrote as a class because the behavior here was very similar to when the player picked up the hamburger. So I had an opportunity to take that knowledge that I learned as a class and put it in with my code. So let's see if I got the point there. Specifically identifies at least 2 program development difficulties and opportunities. So I had the removing the bomb, and then the second one was an opportunity, which was the use of the distance function. So that seems good. The response earns the point if it identifies 2 opportunities and/or difficulties, or 1 opportunity and 1 difficulty, and describes how each was resolved or incorporated. So I think I described how I resolved my difficulty and how I incorporated the opportunity. So I think I got my full point there. All right, it's time for question 2C, and question 2C has 3 points. So this is the highest valued question. So it's row 4, row 5, and row 6. These are each 1 point each. So for row 4, selected code segment implements an algorithm. So we have to capture and paste a program code segment that implements an algorithm. So for me, I'm going to go into my code, and I'm going to copy and paste the update code right here. So copy it and pasting it. And pasting it looks pretty terrible here. So let me try to paste that differently. Command-Shift-V. Nope, it still looks pretty bad. I'm going to get rid of the bold with Command-B and then Command-V. Still looks pretty bad. You could try to tidy it up, but you could also just leave it as it is. So I'm going to just leave it as it is. I think the reason why it came out so bad actually is this update is not copying and pasting the indent. So maybe let me just try to highlight that one more time. Command-C, and then I'll delete this and do a Command-V. Yeah, so that looks a little better to me, but not great. It looks like if you deleted all of this white space from each of them, it would look better, but I'm not going to go through the trouble of doing that on video. All right, so this is the algorithm that I wrote, and now we need to describe, let's see, capture and paste the program code. So we did that. That implements the algorithm, and that is fundamental to your program to achieve its intended purpose. This code segment must be an algorithm you developed individually on your own, must include 2 or more algorithms, and must integrate mathematical and/or logical concepts. So if you're having a bit of a panic for this mathematical part, remember, logical concepts are okay. So in particular, conditional statements are logical concepts where you had to choose between 2 different branches in the code. Okay. So describe how each algorithm within your selected code functions independently as well as in combination with the others to form a new algorithm that helps to achieve the intended purpose of your code. So you want to actually type this all out here, but I'm not going to type it all out here because the video is getting a bit long, and maybe we can just go through it out loud. So we have the selected code segment, and it definitely implements an algorithm. So we've got the point for row 4 just from copying and pasting our algorithm. For row 5, selected code segment implements an algorithm that uses mathematical or logical concepts and explains how the selected algorithm functions. Maybe actually this part is good to write out. So, and it describes what the selected algorithm does in relation to the overall purpose of the program. The algorithm that I have chosen is the update method for the bomb class that I wrote independently. So let's see, the selected code segment implements an algorithm that includes at least 2 or more algorithms, and at least one of the algorithms uses mathematical or logical concepts and explains how one of the included algorithms functions independently. This algorithm checks to see the distance between each monster and the bomb dropped. To do this, the algorithm uses its first sub-algorithm the the get distance function that we wrote together as a class. This subalgorithm uses the distance formula from math in order to compute the distance between two sprites. All right, and then the next part here is I have a second subalgorithm. So the second subalgorithm compares the distance between the bomb and enemy to a collision distance, and if the two collide, runs through a series of steps which add to the score, play a sound.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
Oops, it said Siri thought that series was for her. So I don't know if you guys could hear my phone in the background, but Siri just went off because series sound similar. So which add to the score, play a sound, and remove the monster and bomb from the game. All right, cool. And then for row 7 and row 8, we need to make sure that we're, oops, it looks like I have an extra thing here. I'll delete that later. Question 2D, capture and paste a program code segment that implements an abstraction you developed individually on your own, marked with a rectangle in section 3 below. So we'll get to this marking thing below. This abstraction must integrate mathematical and logical concepts, explain how your abstraction helps manage the complexity of your program. So in my case, my abstraction is the entire bomb class. So we're going to copy and paste the entire bomb class with that comment about how I created it independently, taking off the bold with Command B, or you could take off the bold here using toggling this. So then Command V. So now we've got the bomb class here, and it's been pasted in, and then we have to answer some questions about it. So selected code segment is a student-developed abstraction. Yep, this is my student-developed abstraction. And then we have to answer this question. Explains how the selected abstraction manages the complexity of the program. Having a class for the bomb allows the game to easily create complex objects. So abstractions are all about simplifying complexity. So it allows it to create complex objects, the bombs, that have identical features and functionality. And I think we can improve on this response. So let me try to improve on that above here. So this is my first take on it. The bomb class that I wrote independently simplifies the structure of my code by providing a template to the game to easily create complex objects, the bombs, which have identical features and functionality. All right, so let's see if I would have got their point for that. So row 8, responses should not be penalized for explanations of abstractions that are not developed by the student. I'm not sure why that note is there. Do not award the point for each of the following. The explanation does not apply to the selected abstraction. So this definitely applies to the selected abstraction. The abstraction is not explicitly identified. It is explicitly identified. It's the bomb class. So let me just make sure. The bomb class that I wrote independently simplifies the structure of my code by providing a template to the game to easily create complex objects, the bombs, that have identical features and functionality. If you felt like you had to write more, you could write more about how it makes those and what those features are. All right, so then the last step here is actually deceptively challenging, which is you have to copy and paste your entire program code. So you're going to start off by taking your entire program code. So if you go into Sublime Text and you do Command A, it will select everything, and you should see a light gray background around everything. Command C, and then Command V into the Google Doc, and it should paste in the entire program code. Now, this actually isn't complete. this is the most frustrating part of the program, of the create task to me, is that you have to mark with an oval the program code that implements the algorithm you created, and mark with a rectangle the segment of program code that represents an abstraction. And so I'm going to show you how to add rectangles and ovals to your program code. So there's a couple different examples that we need to go through. So let's imagine, so in my case, my rectangle is going to be around the oval because the algorithm for me is inside of the abstraction, but you might not have those inside, like one inside of the other. You might have those separate. So I wanted to show you how to do those separate first. So marking something with a rectangle as your, or let's do the oval first. Mark with an oval the segment of program code that implements the algorithm you created for your program. Okay, so let's say this is not my algorithm, but let's say my algorithm was this update score algorithm. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut this out using Command X, and then you're going to insert a drawing here, new, and then from the drawing you're going to put in a text box, and then you're going to do Command V here to paste in your algorithm, and then you can move things over a bit here. I'll just line it up, and then you can insert a shape here, and the shape will be, in this case, this is supposed to be my algorithm, so it should be a circle or an ellipse. So highlight over that with the circle, and then make it transparent by clicking the background thing and marking it as transparent. You can change the border color to red or whatever you want to change it to, and then make it a little bit thicker. So here you go, save and close. And what that will do is it'll put your abstraction or your algorithm there. And unfortunately, like as ugly as this is, there's no points for beauty here. This is the only way that I could find in order to circle text in Google Docs. It's not much better in Word. They really need to probably change the way that this is being done. But what's important here is that this is in the same place in the code that it was. So even though it's got this weird white space down here, in terms of the order of the code, this is in the right location, this update score thing. So then let's say here that our abstraction, and this is not the case, let's say our abstraction was the player class. We're going to do something very similar. Highlight the entire player class. Use Command X to cut that. Then we're going to insert into the document a drawing, new, and then we'll add a text box. And then we'll paste it in, and this text box is going to have to be a bit bigger in order to fit all of the text. All right, I'm going to add some more white space at the bottom, and then keep, this is so frustrating to do, keep scrolling down until the entire thing is filled up. Okay, cool. So now we've got our text box there, and we're going to put this entire abstraction inside of a rectangle. So click here, draw a shape. The abstraction is a rectangle, so make sure that you put a rectangle around it all. So that blue rectangle is from the text box, but we want to put a different rectangle over it. Now you need to make this rectangle transparent, so you click on it, click the background icon, transparent. You can make it any color you want, so maybe blue this time, and maybe also changing the thickness back to 3 pixels, so saving it and closing it. And so now we've got our player class here, and you'll notice that my player class is actually too big to fit into this text box, and in order to show everything, I need to shrink it. So you can keep shrinking that until everything fits. And I'm actually running into a pretty annoying problem here, which is even though the text box fits, it's not all showing up on the screen. So else if and all this stuff down here is missing. So let's go back and see where that happens. You guys might have the same problem. So if this dot y is greater than the height, so what we can do here is we can add a second graphic which contains that text. We really need to change this boxing thing. A second graphic that contains that text. So copy this and paste this image. All right, so now pasting that image, we got 2 copies of it. So we're going to go into the image. So the way you can edit the image is you double click it, and we'll delete all the text before this last else if. because it went off the page. Oh man. Actually, it's not letting me edit it, so let's see if we can find an alternative solution. So let's delete this copy, and let's go into the original image. And then for the text, oh, it's the rectangle, that's why it wasn't. So move the rectangle off to the side, and then go into the text box. And maybe what we can do here is we can just change the font size till it's really tiny, and then put the rectangle around it. This is such a silly part of the create task that they make you use this rectangle. It really messes things up. I wish that you could just do it as a comment. So save it and close it. And there we go. It's all good now, but maybe we want to stretch it out so that it's easier to read. All right, so now it's a little bit easier to read. Sorry that this is so janky and put together in such a weird way, but this isn't how I would have designed it. So we got our abstraction in our box, which is the player class, and we've got our algorithm in the circle, which is all good. Now in my case, mine is even more complex because I have to put my abstraction with my algorithm inside. So if you have a case like this, we can go into the BOM class that we wrote here, and we can copy and paste the BOM class. So highlight the BOM class, Command X, and then we're going to insert a drawing, new, and we'll put a text box up here, and we'll make it the length of the page. All right, let's see. I think it's, there we go, the length of the page. Cool. So then we'll create the shapes. So the first shape is the rectangle is for the abstraction, so we'll put the entire abstraction in this rectangle, which did not go as planned, of course. The entire abstraction in this rectangle. Then we'll make it transparent. We'll add the border to it, any color that we want. So it could be, I don't know, green, 3 pixels. And then we also need to put our algorithm in a circle. So for me, my algorithm was this update algorithm, which I can't highlight because now we got the rectangle on top of it, but let's put a circle. And we'll try to put that around the update algorithm. And cool. All right, that was fun. And then we'll make the background here blue, or the border color blue. And now we've got our algorithm circled as well. All right, so saving it and closing it. There we go. We've got it complete. So this last bit was pretty complicated, but what's important is you have your entire program code, and then you mark with an oval using this crazy process that I showed before, your abstraction, and you mark with the oval is the algorithm. Make sure it's the algorithm. And then with a rectangle, you mark the abstraction. So we reviewed a couple of cases. If they're separate, you'll have your oval and your rectangle separate. And you may have to resize the font in order to fit it all inside of that rectangle, which was a frustrating error that I had. Or you might actually have your algorithm inside of your abstraction, and then you'd have a situation like this where you have your algorithm and abstraction together. So I'm sorry for the complexity of this. It's not ideal that we're all having to use Google Drive for it. It's also not ideal the way that they designed the test, where you had to put these shapes in. But I hope that this was helpful, guys. And I will see you, actually, I guess I won't see you for a long time because of the quarantine, but we'll talk soon. Bye.